Hello, very beautiful community. A few of you have asked me to react to this news story of a Kremlin hack talking about the risk of civil war in Russia in a long form ideological article about the nature of Russia's future. So let's strap ourselves in and do this together, beautiful community. We're just going to quickly react to a write up of this in the exile publication, the Moscow Times. Are you ready? Okay. Kremlin chief sociologist has declared that Russia faces the threat of civil war, is their title. So this is actually in Russian. I haven't found the English version on the Moscow Times page, so that is run through ChatGPT. The answer is no. The Kremlin doesn't have a chief sociologist, and this is not a translation mistake. It's a Russian mistake. Greg Uden often talks about this. In a completely bizarre and humiliating way, Russians call opinion poll folks, polling experts, sociologists, which is obviously weird. There must be an explanation of where that mistake comes from. I don't know. But it's quite highly embarrassing because all sophisticated Russians call pollsters sociologists. They're not sociologists. Sociology is the enterprise of interpretive social inquiry into the patterns and causation of how societies work. Blah blah blah. Okay, forget about that. Russia could face a civil war due to the accumulation of social, economic, and political conflicts, warned Mr. Alexander Kharichev, head of the Presidential Directorate for Monitoring and Analyzing Social Processes. He expressed, which is a kind of a social monitoring unit, he expressed this in an article titled "Who Are We?" published in the journal State, issued by the Russian Presidential Academy of National Economy and Public Administration, and by the DNA of Russia project. So the first long blurb is a sort of reservation for loyal bureaucrats. According to Kharichev, civil war is one of the 5 major challenges facing Russia. They include loss of political, territorial, and cultural sovereignty. It's so humiliating, the various hilarities and contortions that Kremlin hackery does with the term sovereignty. They're so absurd about it. They might as well be talking about having a sovereign breakfast. 2, depopulation. 3, loss of citizens' trust in government and breakdown of the political system. And 4, dehumanization, or the transformation of Russians into mere consumers. I mean, oh my God. This is one of the most disgustingly, distortedly, exaggeratedly consumerist regimes on earth, the Putin regime. Okay, it's lucky we're not reading the real thing, by the way, because we would be here too long and laugh too hard. The Kremlin official argued that the response to a threat of civil war must be the formation of a solid, have I done something wrong? Of a solidarity-based and cohesive society. Maybe something's gone wrong in my ChatGPT translation. When it's really important, I translate directly myself for you. When it's not, it's okay to do this because we're going to get the broad gist anyway. He proposed achieving this through the ideology of "we don't abandon our own," which he said should be based on Russia's civilizational code. The same ideology, he added, should also protect against the loss of. Hang on, beautiful community. I need to make some phone calls because I'm needing to take care of my own sovereignty protection today. I need to make my microphone sovereign, beautiful community, so that I speak in them in a very sovereign way. The same ideology, he added, should also protect against the loss of sovereignty. Kharichev announced that a new law on patriotic education may soon be adopted, requiring all government bodies, education institutions, and other public and state structures to instill corresponding attitudes in citizens. All right. I think that might be enough. What the hell is going on here? Well, I think, first of all, the question with any such piece is, who is this for? And I think the best thing to say is that it's a resource acquisition enterprise for a particular block to which this chap belongs, via the invocation of certain kinds of fears and paranoias or legitimate concerns that are anywhere already present in the Kremlin and in Putin's head. So this is a very common enterprise. So it's a resource acquisition enterprise, a sort of bureaucratic hackery with some reference to actual fears to justify resource allocation. Now, and bid for political control over various things. The second enterprise is just reputational elevation for this chap. And the way these Kremlin hacks usually operate is that they try to position themselves as though they are leading something by very intelligently following or mirroring something. I don't want to generalize across the board. I don't want to say that Mr. Kharichev is doing exactly the same thing that Mr. Karaganov is doing or whatever, or even as an outsider, Mr. Dugin is doing. But the rough enterprise is you find out or guess what Putin in his innermost circle is talking about. You start talking about that too, but with even greater intensity. So you mirror back to the Kremlin what you think is already being ventilated there, with a view to being perceived as some kind of thought leader. So that's the second element. There's a resource acquisition element. There's a reputational advancement element. What's the broad analysis apart from aspiration and who is this for? There is no such thing as Russia's civilizational code or the Russian person of the future, because largely it's based on, all such talk is based on an account of Russia's civilizational mission that is detached from any resources that are actually available. And in particular, the idea to jettison all Western resources for collective self-understanding for Russia is a completely failed enterprise, because Russia is necessarily going to be reliant on those. If it jettisons them, it just ends up talking to itself in a kind of ludicrous way Dugin talks to Russia, which is a way of saying you've jettisoned Western resources, but in fact going on to tell a story that is completely constructed of materials stolen from Western culture and Western intellectual history. So this is really like a dog trying to run away from its tail, the notion of conceiving of a Russian civilizational path that uses no Western resources to construct it. And that's why, in part, the next video on the main channel, by the way, is going to be about Soviet nostalgia that's still alive in the world and in Russia. But one of the reasons all of their symbols are to do with the past is that they do not have any way of putting together a meaningful picture of Russia's future. Russia is futureless. If you listen to Kremlin messaging and Kremlin propaganda, they can't gain any articulacy about that at all. So they just have to revert to kind of postmodern abstractions of symbols that used to have definite meanings in the Soviet past, for instance, which now are used by the Kremlin as sort of ciphers in which anything can be imposed. Beyond that, we get to the real question of prospect of civil war in Russia. To a degree, civil wars are radical events, which means that you can't read them off current patterns. They have a degree of historical unpredictability to them. Roughly speaking, the longer the Putin project continues, the more risk there is of Russia drifting in that direction. I would also say that insofar as Putin is dependent on either foreign escalation or indeed foreign war, a situation in which he needs to prosecute some such enterprise, but isn't able to do so, or isn't able to find a good context in which to start one, he will increasingly have to turn toward the enterprise of systematic enemies within. Right? That's another concern in that direction for Russia. As for something that leads to fragmentation, well, we've already discussed that on the main channel, so I won't say much about that, except just to, for the very few who might not have seen it, put the video on the real odds of Russia's breakup at the end here. But before I do that, a very small announcement. It's very rare that I want to process comment response to a chat I did, but I did a chat yesterday on the flawed but also just appallingly assailed by post-truth authoritarianism, BBC. And I think what algorithmically happened is that most of us just skipped that video, and the people who watched it out of our subscriber base were the people most fueled by anti-institutional sentiment. So I saw something in the comments that I've never seen before. I think it represents a very small minority of the community still, but it'll be worth processing because it raises two issues. One, comprehension, right? Something like 50% of the comment did not comprehend the message of the video, because I said that the BBC did indeed make a very serious mistake in their editing of Trump a few months ago, but the comments were, well, why did you play this thing down so much when it was such a gross violation? Well, I didn't. I made it clear that it was very serious. And the almost robotic unhearing of that, the robotic incapacity to hear that, because you need to say the 2 or 3 sentences you prepared earlier about anti-institutional stuff, came from a small segment of folks who are subscribed, very small segment, but because nobody really watched that video, that segment got exaggerated. So that's going to be worth processing. The second thing that's going to be worth processing is, my God, just the psychology of how you live with flawed institutions, which are doing X, Y, Z wrong, which can't take care of themselves properly, which can't get things right, which can't defend themselves properly, but which we still need. Now, I'm just getting a call from the complaints unit for people who tell their audiences off. So I'm going to have to take that call and say lots of love. Talk to you very soon.